Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWireTV interview. I'm joined today by Nicholas Stewart from Dowson Turco Lawyers. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex.
Now, I thought we'd start at the beginning. So can you please tell us about Dowson Turco Lawyers and the areas of law that you specialize in?
Yep, sure. We were born in 2008. Started off quite small, but have had year-on-year growth. We're quite big now. We've got a corporate and commercial team, a litigation team for commercial disputes, but we've also got a criminal law team and sometimes corporate law and criminal law crossover, as well as an estate team and family law team. So we're quite big in terms of what we do. But litigation and commercial work is a large part of the firm.
So what services do you offer to tech companies, tech workers in the IT industry, especially in the age of COVID, where so many of us are now working from home?
Well, lots. And we've got lots of tech clients, international tech clients, as well as Australian tech clients. Right now, we're acting for a Ukrainian company that's suing SiteMinder in New South Wales, relating to a contract dispute. But we've also acted for music feeds, various online websites that have merged. But sometimes a lot of that work relates to employment disputes within tech companies, contractors leaving or taking confidential information, or discrimination or workplace incidences. During COVID, I think generally, you've got most people working from home, so there's less risk associated with conduct within the office, but there's still risks associated with safety at home, but also using communication tools and devices at home.
Now, can you please elaborate on any of the legal issues you've mentioned, the legal issues arising from lockdown, from privacy and workplace conduct, and give us some more examples?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think some of the biggest issues, particularly for small businesses, are phishing scams and data breaches by virtue of employees not really being able to identify what is a suspicious email. We're seeing more and more sophisticated scams where professional services firms are being impersonated. And what we kind of see is that we have a duty to educate. Even my firm has the same risks. So we're educating our employees to help them identify suspicious emails, manage their updates and security patches on their desktop computers, but also pass on that knowledge to clients, because when clients are hacked, it can have disastrous consequences for them financially and psychologically, because you do feel like you've been invaded, personally. You feel like not just your personal financial safety has gone out the window, but you feel psychologically affected too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the amount of scams is just going through the roof. It was big in 2020. It's even bigger in 2021. So clearly there's a lot of issues. And we've heard a lot of information about, in the US, for example, people leaving different companies and, Google suing Waymo and vice versa, and people stealing secrets. So it's a hot topic. And it's clearly an area of law that is getting a lot of attention at the moment.
Yeah, it is, Alex. It's, tech is the new frontier in terms of legal risk. And I think we're going to see governments making more and more laws to regulate how we use data and how we manage our systems.
Yeah. So from a legal standpoint, what are the issues around the types of equipment that a workplace should be ensuring its workers have available, such as ergonomic chairs or IT equipment powerful enough to allow workers to do the job?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, across Australia, we have workplace health and safety laws, and they generally mandate that employers take care of their employees, and that includes providing them with a safe work environment. Every employer should really have a work health and safety management plan that identifies risks, and that includes ergonomics. When you've got your staff at home, that means that you should probably be checking in with them and checking, what kind of chairs are they using. Where is their eyesight in relation to their screen? How far away is their screen? Are they using a desktop screen or their computer screen? And these are all issues that we take for granted when we're in the office. But when you've got a remote workforce, you probably need someone with skills in ergonomics to be able to assess that environment and make recommendations as to the changes. You can't really be in your employees' homes managing that stuff. And so your obligation really extends to ensuring that they have access to all the tools necessary to create a safe workplace at home.
Yeah, I mean, these days you've got standing desks. You have the glasses that have the blue light blocking. You have all sorts. I mean, there's so many things these days. I guess, is there a checklist that employers and employees can avail themselves of?
Look, there's a lot online in relation to checklists, and I would encourage people to go online and have a look.
Mm.
Searching work health and safety checklist for working at home, you're going to get a lot of good material. But what I would generally say is treat it like it's the office.
Mm.
Assume that the same risks can arise at home, and probably more so because you've got children sometimes at home, babies walking around.
Pets.
Um, and also we're not commuting, and we're not necessarily separating out our lunch breaks.
Mm.
So you're constantly at your computer, or from the minute you get up, effectively, to the minute you finish at night. I think there's a lot that employers could do in terms of making sure that employees are taking breaks, that have a safe setup, a safe chair, and aren't crouching over their computers all day.
Yeah, a friend of mine gave me a code for an app that I'm forgetting now, but I'll link to it. And it's an app that's for Macs only. It's called Buddy or something. But what it does is every 4 hours or so, it tells you to stop and do some exercises, do some stretches. Roll some a sort of a rolling exercise thing over your quads, and it's trying to keep you moving and not sort of stuck in one spot. So all those little things all help, and I guess people can forget, employers can forget, employees can forget, and the next thing you've got a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, I think a lot of the younger employees are still sometimes living in share houses.
Mm.
So on top of that ergonomic and physical safety, you've also got confidentiality issues. There's all kinds of things that arise at home which we don't think about otherwise.
Yeah, and no doubt if an employer was to contact you, you could help them with all of these issues.
Yeah, look, we'd always we'd always like our small businesses and large business clients to come to us before issues arise. Say to us, look, what can you advise about the legal risks with the current setup? And we could probably help them avoid some very costly disputes. But more likely than not, we are engaged when there is an incident, and when it's too late to prepare for that risk. And so it's always better to be ready and prepared than kind of clean up the mess at the end.
So does Dowson Turco Lawyers represent people across Australia or only in New South Wales? And are there uniform laws across Australia, or do they vary from state to state and jurisdiction to jurisdiction?
Sure, good question, Alex. Look, we act across Australia and we act internationally. We've got clients around the world.
Well, you mentioned Ukraine before, so definitely
that's
international.
Right. International, yeah. We've acted for American employers too who've had issues with their Australian workplaces, and American employers generally have a lot of freedoms that Australian employers don't. And so sometimes our work is we're involved in educating foreign employers about their obligations here. But look, to answer your question, workplace and health and safety laws are different across Australia. Every state and territory has its own work health and safety laws. But the Fair Work Act is an overarching Commonwealth law that applies to all states and territories. And that does create obligations on employees to create generally a safe workplace. So what I'd say to any employer in any state and territory is familiarise yourself with your state or territory's workplace health and safety laws, because they generally relate to conduct within the workplace, ergonomics, safety risks, construction risks, you name it, identifying hazards in the workplace, but also place obligations on employers, sometimes managers and sometimes employees, to identify, report and manage workplace risks.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned briefly before when I asked about other resources online, but are there any other websites you can point to? Is there resources at your website, or what's the sort of Google searches people should do to find reliable information?
Yeah, sure. Look, the first point of call, I think, is the Fair Work Commission website. I think it's a really good website. It has a lot of information on it, and it's easy to navigate and easy to understand. So I think that's the first place to go to. The second place is, if you're in New South Wales, Service New South Wales has a great website. It's called WorkSafe New South Wales, and that has some great resources for employers. On top of that, every state and territory has various, corporates that offer free information for users in that jurisdiction. In New South Wales, again, we've got a website called Law Access New South Wales, which has really great information, free legal advice effectively for employers and employees. But then you'd also go to a firm, obviously come to me if you've got any questions, but there are lawyers who specialize in work health and safety law in every state and territory, and some of them may have a very specific understanding of the laws that apply in that jurisdiction.
Now, you probably answered this a little bit before, but when should an individual or a business contact a law firm such as your own?
Well, look, I think generally, I think for businesses, they should come to a lawyer as soon as they start operating, and they should have a legal kind of health check every year. I often say that I think a lot of our business clients would say to us that they wish they'd come to us before
First.
for a plan rather than us cleaning up the mess at the end, because it's a lot more expensive at the end. And there are things you can do to manage risks. Like I said before, having a risk management plan, having really good contracts with your employees, having a good communications plan with educating your employees about the legal risks that might arise in your business. There's all kinds of things you can do in the lead up or throughout the employment relationship. And that those start from the minute you offer an employee work right through to managing their performance and then the end of the employment relationship.
Yeah, every step of the way. The departure, everything, leave.
That's right.
Everything. Now, what else should workers and employers know about that I haven't asked?
Yeah, well, there's lots, but I think from our general experience, I think the biggest issues that arise for employers is managing the employment relationship and managing workers that might not be doing the right thing. So issuing warnings, engaging in performance management, and doing so in a way that you're not breaching fair work laws or work health and safety laws. So ensuring that you're creating a safe environment for the employee, even though they may be under scrutiny. I think that's one of the big things. Another big thing is obviously managing data, having confidentiality systems in place, ensuring that employees know how to manage data, having the software and tools at hand to protect data, downloading regular security patches, and having a conversation about data and how it's protected in the business, I think is really important, because you get bogged down in your day-to-day work and you're not really thinking about the information that you're dealing with and how it might be protected or not protected.
And you often hear about people using shadow IT, like they're using Dropbox instead of Teams or OneDrive or Google Drive. They're using some other sort of system because it's easier, and then the data gets sent there, and the company doesn't have any sort of deduplication or data safety things in place because it's sort of too small, and then data is suddenly everywhere, and it's a security risk.
Yeah, it's a huge risk, and we've actually had lots of clients engaged who've suffered data breaches, and it can be quite costly for them in relation to regulators and government departments.
Let alone their reputation. Let alone reputation.
Do you want your customers to trust you? If it gets out that you're not managing data, are you going to have a business tomorrow? They're really big factors. And you're right. And I think we've got lots of apps. We've got lots of systems. Sometimes too much technology can simply create a mess. You want your technology to be streamlined. You want systems to work together, not in isolation. And I think it's really good to have a good IT manager or a good advisor to manage that stuff, as well as the legal consequences, really.
Now, as we get towards the end of the interview, I still have a few more questions, but one of the questions I always like to ask is, what is your memory of your first computer?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's probably the Apple Macintosh computer that I had in my classroom in year 3. And we would basically use Print Shop, I think it was called, to create decorative postcards and letters. Yeah, it was unreal. And that really started my fascination with tech and using computers. And it only just went better from there. I wish I'd bought shares in Apple at that time.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
And so what was the first legal incident that you worked on involving technology?
I think that really good question. And I think I've had lots, but I think it was a data breach when I was a baby corporate lawyer. And just as data was becoming a big thing, and dealing with insurers, but also customers and claims from all angles for a corporation that wasn't really managing its data very well. That's probably my first experience, and really taught me a lot about data management and legal risks with data.
And of course, today we have the mandatory data breach reporting scheme, which didn't exist back then. So, I mean,
absolutely,
yeah.
And it's a really good scheme actually, and managed in a way that helps people navigate data rather than with a big stick. But it's an area that's going to become more and more regulated as we evolve.
Yeah, and it's a good lesson for consumers as well, and for businesses. It's not a case of if your data is going to be breached; it's a case of when, and what you've done to mitigate that from before it happens, and how you've managed everything and encrypted everything and secured everything. I mean, it's can be a real legal nightmare, as you've been explaining to us, if you don't get it right. And it reminds me of when, in the early days, I mean, security was never a primary consideration. And today, unless a company builds security in from the ground floor, I mean, it's very expensive to retrofit it. And it's exactly the same for the legal issues you've been talking about.
Yeah, totally. But a lot of it is communication. You want all the people in your organization to understand how the technology works, how it can be applied, and the practical consequences if it's not working properly or if it's not applied properly. So, data management and confidentiality of data is something that should really be in the everyday conversation. At my firm, it's every morning we discuss it, and it needs to be a really live issue.
Yeah. So how do you think the law will evolve in this area over the next few years?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot more law. I think there's going to be a lot more regulation. We're already seeing more laws relating to surveillance devices and accessing encrypted data from government's perspectives. I think that's something that we're all going to, have to confront. But also, I think there's going to be more obligations on corporations to manage data. Some organizations, if you think about the banks, Commonwealth Bank has an enormous data storage capacity and knows a lot about us. But there's also loyalty schemes like Flybys or Qantas Frequent Flyer. How are those organizations managing data? Where is that data going? And do users or members understand how their data is being managed?
Yeah, absolutely. So my second last question to you is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Probably just go slowly and don't be afraid to ask questions, because, we're all learning. We're all constantly learning, and you can't possibly know everything. So it's really just knowing when to ask the right questions and asking them of the people who can give you the good guidance or knowledge.
And so my last question is, what is your final message to iTWire readers and viewers, and to your current and future customers and partners, and I guess clients?
Well, I think risk management should be front of mind. Having a risk management plan, identifying risks in the workplace is critical to your lives, whether you're an employee or an employer, because sometimes employees will have obligations that they're unaware of. And might have consequences for them as employees. But employers can also avoid very costly mistakes by identifying and managing risks.
Well, Nicholas Stewart from Dowson Turco Lawyers, I hope I never have to be your client, but I do hope we can talk again in the future. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.